Welcome back. And joining me now is Democratic Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis. Mayor Frey, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here in the wake of such a monumental week for your city. I want to start with the Trump administration arguing ICE officer Jonathan Ross was acting in self-defense. You have now seen the officer's cell phone video. What is your response? Do you believe the officer was acting in self-defense?
In the immediacy following the shooting, you heard people from the Trump administration saying that the victim was a domestic terrorist. You heard that the ICE agent was acting entirely in self-defense. And here's the thing. You don't need to take my word for it. You don't need to take their word for it. Watch the video. The ICE agent was not run over, as Trump stated. You had a person that was definitively trying to just get out of there. They were trying to leave the scene. That is not a person that's trying to run an ICE agent over. You have a person that is trying to protect our city, to look out for our neighbors. And by the way, there are 435,000 people throughout Minneapolis that are looking out for their neighbors right now because they understand the magnitude of this moment, and they understand that the endurance of our republic depends on us looking out for each other, and we're standing strong here in Minneapolis.
Well, I hear you accusing Trump administration officials of a rush to judgment. Is it imperative for leaders like yourself to wait for this investigation to play out before making any type of determination about what exactly happened here, Mayor?
I think that's a fair point to make, and so let's have the investigation in the hands of someone that isn't biased. Let's not have it exclusively run through the FBI at the federal government or the Department of Justice. Let's have it with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at the state level. This is an entity that has expertise. They have a long history of investigating cases just like this, and they have had investigations come, by the way, to both conclusions, with a charge and without a charge. We need to be doing this right now. We need to be doing this transparently. And what I was pushing back on from the very beginning was a narrative that had jumped to that conclusion right from the get-go. And when you've got a federal administration that is so quick to jump on a narrative as opposed to the truth, I think we all need to be speaking out.
Will you accept the results of the FBI investigation, Mayor?
You know, if it was an FBI investigation that was done jointly with an investigation from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, we could have had some trust that there were entities and individuals at the table that were properly reviewing the evidence. Look, I don't know what the results of the investigation will be. I don't know what the evidence behind the investigation will be, other than, of course, the videos that we've all seen with our own two eyes. What I will say is there is deep mistrust because so many of the things that we are hearing are not true. You know, again, obviously people can come to different conclusions and have different perspectives. But when there is debate about baseline facts, like, for instance, did the ICE agent get run over? Guys, the answer is no. It didn't happen.
Let me ask you, you told ICE, quote, to get the F out of Minneapolis. We are now seeing major protests all across the country, as you well know. I know that you've seen them as well. Do you bear any responsibility as a local leader, Mayor Frey, to bring down the temperature right now?
Of course, I bear responsibility to bring down the temperature. That's part of my role as mayor. And by the way, protests here in Minneapolis are peaceful. We had, 10,000 or so people that were protesting and marching yesterday, and virtually all of it was very peaceful expression of First Amendment rights. And, to those that are offended, I'm sorry I offended their delicate ears, but as far as who inflamed the situation, I dropped an F-bomb and they killed somebody. I think the killing somebody is the inflammatory element here, not the F-bomb, which I'm sure we've all heard before.
Well, let me ask you, because bigger picture, before this week, Mayor, ICE had already been ramping up its presence in Minneapolis. You said your police officers would not cooperate with them, that ICE enforcement was unconstitutional. You warned before this deadly shooting, quote, somebody's going to get seriously injured. Would you go so far as saying that you would support abolishing ICE?
Well, first off, I did not say that ICE enforcement was unconstitutional. What I said is the way that they are doing it is unconstitutional. You can't come into a city and discriminate solely on the basis of are you Latino or are you Somali, and then randomly pick people up off the street after that. I mean, we have had pregnant women dragged through the street. We've had teenagers that are American citizens just picked up. You can't just detain somebody because they look like they are Somali or they look like they are Latino. To be very clear for the whole country, that is what is happening right now. So, look, do I think that we should just abolish the entire entity that does immigration enforcement? No. But the way it is being utilized doesn't make sense. I'm not asking for the DOJ to be abolished. I'm not asking for the Office of Management and Budget to be abolished. I am saying that the way that these institutions are being utilized right now by the Trump administration is wrong and, to be clear, is unconstitutional.
Well, let me press you a bit, because Tom Homan, the border czar, says Minneapolis's sanctuary city policy, just for our viewers, that effectively shields undocumented immigrants from deportation, makes it harder for ICE to enforce immigration law. How do you respond to that argument that your city's stance in eliminating cooperation with ICE has made it harder for federal law enforcement to safely enforce immigration laws in your city?
Look, what our policy says is that I don't want our police officers spending time working with ICE on immigration enforcement. Because why? That's not our primary job. You know what I want our police officers doing? I want them stopping murders from happening. I want them preventing carjackings. And by the way, they're doing a hell of a job right now. We've only had 2 shootings in Minneapolis this whole year. And by the way, 50% of them were from ICE. So I want our officers focusing on safety. You know what I don't want them doing? I don't want them spending a single second hunting down a father who just dropped his kids off at daycare, is about to go work a 12-hour shift, who happened to be from Ecuador. That guy, he makes Minneapolis a better place, and I am proud to have him in our city. So, I want our officers focusing on safety, not randomly plucking people off the street and hunting them down.
Let me ask you about the leadership in your state. Dozens of people in Minnesota have been charged and convicted with stealing millions of dollars of taxpayer money for government programs. Do you think Governor Walz did enough to stop the fraud in your state? And do you support his decision not to run for re-election?
Well, look, Governor Walz is the reason that we've got paid family leave in Minnesota. He's the reason we've got free school lunches. Him and I, we've been through thick and thin.
But did he do enough to combat fraud,
over these
Mayor?
last 5 years.
Did he do enough to combat fraud?
Look, obviously, everybody could have done more to prevent fraud, and I think that's a fair point to make. Do more to prevent fraud, and you look what he's doing right now. He's setting up a whole bunch of infrastructure to do that. And by the way, look, the fraud's real. We've all got to acknowledge it. The fraud is very real. And by the way, when somebody commits fraud, and there are many that have done that, you investigate it, you charge, you prosecute, and you put the person in jail. As an individual, you put the person in jail as an individual. You do not hold an entire community, any community, accountable for the actions of individuals.
All right, Mayor Jacob Frey, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.